Hello everyone. A couple of administrative items before we get started. Due to the large number of attendees, we will be muting everybody's microphone during the session. You can type questions in the questions pane located in the control panel. I'll answer some questions at the end of the session, but also feel free to send us comments about the webinar or additional questions to webinars@csiamerica.com. All webinars will be recorded and posted on our website, as well as responses to all unanswered questions. Okay. All right, so in this example, I'll discuss in detail all of the options in the Model Explorer. This includes model definition and manipulating display output, including deflected shape, frame force diagrams, and joint reactions. Then I'll show you detailed reports which can be generated. We'll also go through a complete 3D model generation by importing a DXF file which contains layers, which gives the user the opportunity to generate a fully functional 3D models with the use of the Model Explorer. It's a very powerful tool in model generation. Okay, so you can see that the Model Explorer is located here on the left side of the screen. Users have the option to toggle this on and off under the Options menu under Show Model Explorer. So, okay, what does a Model Explorer do? It essentially provides quick access to many forms to define and assign properties or review geometry, among many other tasks. So options and checkboxes that control how the model displays and what displays on it can be activated here in the Model Explorer as well. So we'll go through, I'll show you how to generate printed output in the Reports tab as well. The way it's set up is the Model Explorer displays in kind of a hierarchical tree format using multiple tabs. These tabs all have nodes as shown here on the left-hand side. And in some cases, sub-nodes are used. So let's take a look at the Properties menu, for example. By right-clicking on the Properties and then perhaps Materials, you'll see that the material has a sub-node as well. When this is clicked, if I right-click on it, various material definitions are displayed, including adding a copy of the definition, deleting the definition. You can modify show, clicking on this, make changes to all the parameters associated with it. You can select material properties as well. So for example, if a frame object was selected prior to right-clicking on this node, the definition can actually be assigned to that selected object. So not only can you perform or assign and define properties, but these can actually be assigned to actual elements as well. And we'll go through a couple examples of that. Other things available in the Model tab, structural layout, properties, structural objects, groups, load patterns, load cases, load combinations, all of these can be defined quite easily. So perhaps we'll take a look at frame sections. We can right-click on one of these to add a new frame element, modify an existing one, make changes to them, and those will be automatically updated here in the Model Explorer. So if we scroll down a little bit, we can take a look at diaphragms. And I'll show you an example of how to actually assign a diaphragm to joint objects or a shell element by selecting all the items here on the right-hand side. So you can see not only joints have been selected, but shells as well. And if you look in the bottom left-hand portion of the screen, it's kind of a bookkeeping system. It tells me exactly what I've selected prior to performing any action on it. So in this case, if I wanted to right-click on, say, diaphragms, you can see there's a rigid, semi-rigid, some other options available to you here. If I right-click on it, you'll see I could delete or modify the rigid diaphragm, but I also have the ability to assign the rigid diaphragms to the joints, the selected joints here on the screen, or to the shell element. So in this case, I'll click Assign Rigid to Joints. And you can see by the kind of spider web diagram located here on the right-hand side of the screen in plan view, that diaphragm has actually been assigned to that floor, in this case, in plan view. Going back up to structural layout, you can see there are options for viewing as well. So if I wanted to perhaps right-click on the fourth floor, I have the ability to select all the items on the fourth floor. I can maybe just show the fourth floor only. Click on the 3D view here on the left-hand side. I'll make this 3D. Okay, so it's showing the fourth floor on the right-hand side, and to regain all the visibility, I can go under View and then Show All Objects again. So this can be very useful in finding certain portions of the model and having them viewed individually. Moving forward here, down to structural objects. So you can pick a specific floor, in this case, maybe the fifth floor. It's going to show you all of the elements that are included in that floor. So in this case, for joint objects, of course, you'll have many of them. But you'll notice if I select one of these joints, it's going to be highlighted and blinking on the screen here, in this case, in 3D view as well. So the same can be done for column elements. If I click on, say, C17 or C19, you can see that they're blinking. It shows the specific location of each one of these columns. Now, if I right-click on this, you can see I can modify show the column. It's giving me the column information property. It's the same information you would receive upon right-clicking on the column itself. So in this case, I can make changes to all the assignments, including section properties, and all the other assignments associated with this specific column, property modifiers, end length offsets, and a few other items as well. Okay, we won't do the same thing, but of course, same thing can be done for beams, braces, any of the other elements that are included in this specific model. And also, if I click on loads, I can define load patterns, load cases. So you're kind of seeing a pattern here for the Model Explorer. I don't necessarily need to use any of the menu items up here to generate a model. It's kind of a shortcut or just another way to access information and definition capabilities in ETABS with the use of the Model Explorer. So I can perhaps right-click on load patterns. You can modify load patterns, add new ones, update existing ones. So a lot of tools available here in the Model Explorer. Okay, let's move ahead to the Display tab. I'm going to put this in plan view on the right-hand side. And we'll take a look at the undeformed shape. And for display, I'd like to take a look at some output. So we'll go ahead and run the analysis here. This just takes a second to run. So the Display tab, while this is running, I can just explain it. It provides access to various features used to display the model in ETABS windows. Similar to the model tab, separate nodes are available for different views. Some nodes have options that affect the display one at a time, where others have checkboxes that can be used to select multiple items to be displayed simultaneously. So if we take a look here under 3D view, I can click on plan, and I can select the specific plan to be viewed very easily. Elevation, the same thing. If I single click it, it will choose the first elevation. If I double click, it will bring up this set elevation view, and I have the ability to pick and choose which elevation I wish to view. Limits. If I double click this, it's basically building view limits. It shows me I can set a story range, I can set an X or Y access limit, or I could manually click on each one of these blue nodes here to set the X and Y limits directly. Okay, this is a very useful tool here. All the options located, you can see a large list located here on the left-hand side. This is very similar to the Set Display Options button. You can see that all the items located here, most of them are included in the Model Explorer as well. So in this case, if I wanted to take a look at the model, view by colors of sections, I can take a look at that. Now, the way this works is when I define each one of the sections, a certain color is associated with each specific section, and I can make changes to those colors very easily under the Define Sections menu. I can view by materials, groups, design types. All of these options are available to the user here as well. If we move down to Objects Present in View, I have the ability to turn on and off specific sections or elements. So if I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, we'll keep the extruded shape on and we'll step in to zoom. I can turn columns off. I can turn the beams off to take a look at maybe just the framing system or the bracing system. I can turn off the floors. So it's a little easier for the user to view. Maybe leave the columns on in that scenario. So I can pick and choose to dissect the model quite easily for viewing purposes. Special effects, you can turn off the extrusion for frames and shell objects quite easily. I think I'll turn the floors back on. And also frame assignments. You can turn on labels, sections, insertion points. All of these tools are available to toggle on and off quite easily. And of course, once you make changes to these, you can take pictures of each one of these views and include them in the report. And I'll show you how to do that here next. Okay, so now that we've looked at all of the display options for input, let's take a look at some output. So by default, I can take, once the analysis is run, this display will show. We can take a look at support, spring reactions, frame and shell forces. Oh, here it is. So I can pick and choose moments, say for dead loads perhaps. I can click apply. You can look at it in a 3D view or, of course, in an elevation view. And I can right-click on any one of these moment diagrams to get more detailed information, equivalent loads, shear and moment diagrams. Now, by default, it's showing me the maximum, but of course, I can scroll along the length of any of these beams or columns to get detailed information at any specific point. And of course, shell forces and stresses can be viewed as well. For any load case, any combination, as well as any mode. Okay. Let's talk about the Reports tab. So this is a very powerful tool. It allows the user to add a new report or update an existing report. We have a couple options here. So a summary report is kind of a default report that has chosen the most common things that engineers are looking for in a report. And if we right click on this, click on show refresh, that will automatically update. But in this case, I'd like to just talk about how the user can pick and choose exactly what they wish to have included in this report. So just a couple things about this model. If we click on define load patterns, you can see we have some wind and seismic loading. I've defined a time history function. We can take a look at some output. All of these plots can be included in the report as well. So if I right click project report, we can take a look at modify report. So let's go through this a little bit. Right now we're in a general tab. I have the ability to modify a cover page. All the data can be included in this menu. A table of contents, figures, and tables can all be included as well. Now, a very useful tool in this portion of the program for this report, the size of these reports can get quite large. So what I like to do is perhaps select a few items, whether it be joints, beams, columns, that are pertinent to my model. And it's only going to report information for those selected items only, instead of the entire model. That'll reduce the amount of the size of the report drastically. So in this case, I can select my load patterns, combinations, cases. So you can see the user has complete control as to what they wish to have included in this report. I don't necessarily need to have point coordinates or line connectivity. But some of the important things are, what I like to include are perhaps auto wind loads for the calculations. It's going to show you in detail how the lateral loads were calculated, all the governing equations, and it's going to show you in a tabular format, all the lateral loads, story shears, and all those things as well. Assignments, diaphragm information, frame releases, all these sorts of things can be included. Output, center of rigidity, column forces. So you can see there's many, many options, and you can see the size of this report can get quite large very quickly. Design information. In this case, it's a steel frame structure. I can run the design, take a look at some output to be included, calculations. All these can be automatically included in this report. Now, let me just take a moment to explain this. So these are the images that can be included in the report. And I'm going to click create, and then I'll go and show you exactly how those were generated. So right now it just takes a moment to create the report. Once you run an analysis, you can take a look under the display menu at some story response plots, some plot functions, and before we dive into this report, let me show you how those were generated. See here on the bottom left-hand portion of the screen, it gives you an update. It's showing me exactly how much of the report has been generated, and it's kind of giving me a progress report there. Okay, just takes a moment here to finish. Okay. All right, while that's going, might take a minute or two We'll touch upon that here just in a moment. I have one more thing I'd like to talk about here today, and that's the generation of a fully functional 3D model when I'm importing DXF files as the basis for it. And you can use the Model Explorer to actually generate the model all the way through. And once the report gets done generating that, I think I may have selected a couple too many items in that one. So that'll finish up here shortly. Okay, in the meantime, I'm going to import a DXF file under the File, Import, DXF DWG Architectural Plan. And so what this is, it's a DXF file that's been created in another program, and it's going to import layers. And it's an architectural plan import. It's asking me where on the screen I'd like to have this imported. You can put in the coordinates, some centerline creation for wall, just some parameters that can be included here as well. Okay, so if we zoom in here a little bit, you'll see that some layers have been brought in, which includes the outline of the floor slab, the wall locations. There's some openings in here. There's some columns that have been defined. So I can use all of these layers to generate a fully functional 3D model quite quickly. And let me show you how to do that with the use of the Model Explorer. Okay, so under the Display tab, if I click on Plan View, you'll notice that the architectural layers, these are all the layers that have been predefined in another program, whether it be MicroStation, AutoCAD. So the locations of the columns, the area, the floors have all been defined in the layers, and ETABS recognizes that. So let's go ahead and create a model using the architectural layers. So say I wanted to include the columns. I can go to the columns layer, and I'll right click on, this one's called S columns, and I can click on Add Column Object. It recognizes the locations of the columns and it will generate them automatically. So I'll just extrude this model to make it a little easier to view. So if I zoom in here, you can see now that the columns have been included in this model. We can add area objects as well. Now you'll notice here before I add them, the reason why this is such a powerful tool, you'll see that if I zoom in here on the edge of this area object, you see it's kind of a curved area object. Now those can be very difficult to draw here in ETABS or in any program. It's curved area elements that have on the edge of the area can be quite complicated. So what we can do here is click on the floor outline, and I'm going to add an area object. So now you'll notice the floors have all been included in this model. So it recognizes the extents of the area, and it will drop an area object right on top of it. So these are default properties. Of course, these can be updated under the Define menu, and we can take a look at that once we've completed the geometry. Some other things to include are the walls. I can click on the walls layer and add wall object. So now you can see here in the 3D view on the right hand side, there are some curved wall elements that have been included. So all the walls can be drawn automatically very quickly in here. Now I want to zoom into this portion of the model. You can see there's some openings. So those can be, it recognizes the locations of the openings as well, and we can cut holes in these slabs. And let me show you how to do that. So I'm going to click on this Draw Quick Floor tool, and I need to define the opening under the property. I'll select Opening, and under Draw Object, using in this case an architectural layer. Okay. So now that those properties of objects have been defined, I can simply right-click on the shaft openings. It's going to draw an area object, but it's going to draw the openings. Now, if I didn't take that extra step, it wouldn't have created an opening, but an actual just slab layer. In these locations. So you can see the openings have now been generated. One last step, you can see that there are some grid lines that have been included in these layers, and that's underneath the S grid layer over here. So now if I right click on the S grid, I can add grid on this into this model as well. So now we've used these layers as a basis of model generation here in ETABS. I'm just going to turn off the layers now so we can see what the actual model looks like. So under Options, Architectural Plan Options, I can deselect all of the layers, turning them off, so we can actually take a look at what our model looks like in ETABS. Okay, so we'll get back to that model here in a second. My report is finally finished. So let's take a look at this. So you can see on the left-hand side, it's got all the table of contents. I can simply double-click on any one of these to take a look at some information. We take a look at the auto wind. I'm going to make this a little bigger for everybody to see, and I'll have this fit to the page. So it's showing me the calculation of the equations for the wind calculation. If I just scroll down here, it will show me the, I think it just ran for the 6th story. Anyway, so you can see it's shown in a tabular format, in a graphical format, the lateral loads, and the same thing can be done for the seismic calculation. Applied story forces for the roof, the entire floor, and a graphical format and tabular format as well. So it's giving me information for anything you want: story displacements, modal frequencies, figures can be included at the end. So it's a very comprehensive format to generate reports. And of course, these can be exported to a Word doc, to a PDF. You can have them printed. So now you'll notice this is a very large document, and that's why I prefaced before running it by picking and choosing certain elements in the model will reduce the size of the report drastically, and will reduce the runtime as well. Okay, now I'm hopping around just a little bit. A couple other things here I'd like to show you in regards to this model. I'm going to turn off the extruded shape. Some other neat features that are included here with the use of the Model Explorer. Now, if I go back to Properties, let's see, I think Structural Objects, Frame Sections. So what I can do, there are some drag and drop tools that are included in here. So if I just right-click on this column element right here, now it has this F section 1 property. Now if I wanted to change that, of course I could select the element and go to Assign Frame Sections and make the change there. But with the drag and drop tools located in the Model Explorer, I can make changes directly. So if I wanted to change this to perhaps steel column, I could just drag this frame section onto this element directly. And you can see now that these are all steel columns because those were all selected, while the other columns are all F section 1. So these drag and drop tools can be used not only for beams, columns, area objects, wall elements. So that's kind of a neat feature that's included here with the use of the Model Explorer. Okay, why don't we take a look at some questions? All right, so what characteristics should the DXF file have? Let's open this model here. We'll take a look at the display. So you can see that each of these architectural layers was defined in great detail. So when you're generating your columns, just to make sure that they are in the specific column layer, and to break up the model individually into those specific elements, such as walls, slabs, area objects. You can see other things that have included here are grids, text. So the more detailed you are in breaking up the model into those specific layers when generating the DXF file, whether it be in AutoCAD or MicroStation, the easier it will be to generate this model here in ETABS with these layers. Oh, that's a good question. So another question is how to create the model using DXF files if the layout is different for each story. So that would be a little more complicated, but not too much. So let me show you. So if I click on File, Import, DXF Architectural Plan, I'll just click on this one again. But you'll notice, so if you do have a number of different DXF files, you'd have to import these DXF files piecewise. So say you have three different layers, three different floors that are different. Here's where you'd select the location of the floor. Now, this is by default 4 stories. You can edit this and make it as many stories as you like. But in this case, my DXF file was imported onto story 4. The next time, if it was different, it could be story 3, story 2, those sorts of things. When I was generating this model, I clicked on this similar stories option. So what that did was any change I'd made to story 4, it automatically replicated to the stories below. That's why the whole model was generated quite easily. There's a question about how does ETABS mesh the curved area object. Let's take a look at that. It breaks it into pieces. It's a default. Let's see if I can take a look at this. Basically, it meshes at the default mesh. Right now, you can see this is broken up into 1, 2, maybe 6 pieces. Of course, it's just default. You can, of course, select the curved area object and make changes to it and mesh it how you'd wish. So if I right-click on this element, you can see that the curved section has been selected, and then I could go to Assign, Shell, Wall Auto Mesh options and make any changes you like. So right now it's just a default, but you can make changes to however you wish. Okay, so that's it for today. Any questions that I think all the questions were answered today. Any questions that were not answered will be included in the report or when we post the model. Okay. One last question. Sorry, this is popping up here. Yes, in this version of 2018, the Tables tab in the Model Explorer has now been excluded. Yes, that's due to the fact that if you go to, we've included everything now underneath the display, show tables. And if you click on this, here you can pick and choose everything you want to select for input and output. Yeah, we've excluded that from the Model Explorer just for clarity. It's a little easier to access just underneath the display menu. Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, guys. Again, this is being recorded and will be posted on our website, as well as answers to the questions that were posed here today will be in a PDF document posted on the website as well, underneath the support tab. Please look at our website for future webinars here in the next few weeks. And again, I thank you all for joining me today. Thanks a lot.